I still remember the sound of the champagne glass hitting the floor with a sickening crack as my brother's fist connected with my face. Blood dripped from my lip onto the pristine white tablecloth of our family's Thanksgiving dinner, mixing with the wine my father had just thrown at me. 2 security guards were already dragging me backward as I watched my mother turn away, choosing to comfort Ethan instead of her daughter who'd just been assaulted. The iPad in my lawyer's hand displayed everything. Every single transaction, every lie, every stolen dollar. I owned 51.3% of Bennett Industrial, and my brother was about to spend the next decade in prison for embezzlement. This was the moment I'd been planning for 3 years, and it tasted better than any turkey dinner ever could. But if you want to understand how a girl who once believed in family loyalty turned into the woman who destroyed her own bloodline, you need to hear the whole story. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this tale of revenge and justice, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and drop a comment below, telling me if you think I went too far or not far enough. Your support means everything. Let me take you back to where it all started, to the night that changed everything. 3 years and 4 months earlier, I stood in the ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, watching my entire world crumble in slow motion. The banner behind the stage read Bennett Industrial 45th Anniversary Celebration, in gold letters that seemed to mock me with every glimmer. I was 28 years old, wearing a navy blue dress I'd bought specifically for this night because I thought I'd be standing on that stage accepting recognition for saving the family company from bankruptcy. For 6 months, I'd worked 18-hour days negotiating with Thornton Manufacturing, our biggest potential client. I'd flown to Chicago 11 times. I'd rewritten the proposal 17 times. I'd even learned Mandarin because their new CEO was originally from Beijing, and I wanted to make him feel respected. The contract I'd landed was worth $42 million over 5 years. It was enough to pull us out of the cash flow crisis that had been strangling us since the 2008 recession finally caught up with our outdated business model. I'd called you my father from the airport when I signed the deal. Robert Bennett, founder and CEO. The man I'd worshipped my entire childhood. He'd said he was proud of me. He'd said I was finally proving myself worthy of the Bennett name. He'd said this would change everything. He wasn't lying about that last part. I watched from my table near the back as my father took the microphone. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his custom Tom Ford tuxedo fitting him like he'd been born in it. He looked every inch the successful industrialist, the self-made man who'd built an empire from the small machine shop his father had left him. Next to him stood Ethan, my older brother by 3 years. Golden boy, Ethan, with his Princeton degree that our parents had bought with a new library wing donation. Ethan, who'd been handed the chief operating officer position at 25 despite never having worked anywhere else. Ethan, who spent more time at strip clubs than in strategy meetings. Ethan, who was wearing a Rolex I knew cost more than most of our factory workers made in a year. My father's voice boomed through the sound system. I can still hear every word. This company has survived and thrived for 45 years because of dedication, innovation, and the Bennett family commitment to excellence. Tonight, I want to recognize someone who embodies all of those values. Someone who just closed the biggest deal in our company's history. Someone who proved that the next generation of Bennett leadership is ready to take us into the future. My heart started pounding. I stood up, smoothing down my dress. Several people at nearby tables smiled at me, nodding. They knew. Everyone knew it was my deal. I want to thank my son, Ethan Bennett, for his tireless work on the Thornton Manufacturing contract. The applause started. I felt like I was underwater. Everything moved in slow motion. Ethan walked to the microphone with that smug smile I'd seen my entire life. The smile that said he'd gotten away with something again. The smile that said the rules didn't apply to him. I started walking toward the stage. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. People were staring at me now, confused. My father's assistant tried to step in front of me, but I moved past her. When I reached the steps to the stage, Ethan turned and saw me. For just a second, his mask slipped. I saw calculation in his eyes. Then he walked down to meet me, putting his arm around my shoulders, like we were sharing a moment. He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. To anyone watching, it must have looked like a tender sibling moment. "You're just a pawn, little sister. You always have been. Now smile and sit the fuck down." I pushed him away and grabbed the microphone from the stand. The feedback screech made everyone wince. That contract was mine. I'm the one who spent 6 months negotiating it. I'm the one who learned Mandarin. I'm the one who gave up my weekends and my sleep and my entire life for this company. Ethan has never even met anyone from Thornton Manufacturing. The silence in that ballroom was deafening. 400 people in formal wear, frozen like a photograph. My father's face had gone red. My mother, sitting at the head table in her Oscar de la Renta gown, looked like she might faint. My father took 3 steps toward me. His voice was ice. "Ava, you're making a scene. Sit down." "I won't sit down. I won't let you give him credit for my work again. I won't." "Then maybe you don't belong at Bennett Industrial anymore." The words hung in the air. I couldn't breathe. He looked past me to the back of the room and nodded. I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps. When I turned, 2 security guards were approaching the stage. My father took the microphone back. His voice was steady, now practiced the voice of a man making a difficult but necessary decision. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. It has recently come to my attention that Ava Bennett has been sharing confidential business information with our competitors. This is a serious breach of trust and corporate ethics. Effective immediately, she is terminated from all positions at Bennett Industrial and removed from all company premises." The ballroom erupted. Cameras flashed. I could see reporters scrambling for their phones. This was going to be in the business section of every major newspaper by morning. The security guards took my arms, not roughly, but firmly, professionally, like I was a criminal. I didn't struggle. I kept my eyes locked on my father's face as they led me down the steps through the silent crowd toward the exit. I needed him to see that I wasn't crying. I needed him to see that I wasn't broken. When I reached the doors, I stopped. The guards tensed, but I just turned around. My father was watching me from the stage. Ethan stood beside him, barely containing his grin. I raised my voice so everyone could hear. "You're going to regret this day. I promise you that." Then I walked out into the November cold, with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. They didn't even let me go to my office to collect my things. My assistant boxed everything up and had it delivered to my apartment the next day, with a severance check for exactly 2 weeks of pay and a form releasing the company from all legal liability. I didn't cash that check. I framed it instead and hung it on the wall across from my bed so I'd see it every morning when I woke up. A reminder. A promise to myself. The next 3 months were the darkest of my life. The industry press crucified me. Every article mentioned the accusation of corporate espionage, even though there was never any evidence because it wasn't true. My professional reputation was destroyed. Nobody would hire me. Nobody would even take my calls. My mother called twice. Once to tell me I'd embarrassed the family. Once to tell me I should apologize to my father, and maybe he'd consider letting me work in the mailroom to earn back his trust. I hung up on her both times. I lived off my savings and spent my days in my tiny studio apartment, rage building inside me like pressure in a volcano. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake planning impossible scenarios where I made them all pay, where I exposed Ethan for the fraud he was, where I proved to my father that he'd chosen the wrong child. Then one morning, I was drinking coffee and hate scrolling through LinkedIn when I saw a post from Jackson Wu. We'd gone to business school together at Columbia. He'd been recruited straight out of school by Blackstone Capital, one of the most aggressive hedge funds in New York. His post was about creative approaches to distressed asset acquisition. I sent him a message. We met for lunch the next day. Jackson listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Ava, what would you say if I told you I could teach you how to not just get revenge, but how to take everything they have? I want to learn. Prove it. Show me you're serious. Show me you're willing to become someone new." "What do you mean?" "The Ava who believed in fairness and family is dead. If you want to survive in my world, you need to become a shark. No mercy. No second guessing. Can you do that? I looked down at my hands. I thought about my father's face when he lied to that ballroom full of people. I thought about Ethan's whisper in my ear. I thought about my mother choosing them over me, over truth, over basic human decency. Yes, I can do that. Jackson got me an interview at Ravencroft Capital, a boutique hedge fund known for taking down family businesses and liquidating them for parts. The interview was brutal. 3 partners grilled me for 4 hours on market analysis, corporate law, and hostile takeover strategies. But I'd spent the previous 2 weeks studying like my life depended on it. Because it did. They hired me as a junior analyst at a salary that was actually less than I'd made at my family's company. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the education. For 2 years, I learned everything. How to read a balance sheet and find the lies buried in footnotes. How to identify vulnerable companies and exploit their weaknesses. How to use shell corporations and offshore accounts. How to make a CEO beg for mercy and then deny it to them. How to be ruthless. I was good at it. Better than good. I closed 6 acquisitions in my first year, bringing in profits of over $30 million for the fund. They promoted me to senior analyst and doubled my salary. 6 months later, they made me a partner. I bought a penthouse apartment in Tribeca. I hired a personal trainer and a stylist. I got my MBA from NYU at night while working 70-hour weeks. I became the woman I needed to be. Cold, calculating, unstoppable. And while I was becoming a predator, I was watching my prey from a distance. I'd hired a private investigator to monitor Bennett Industrial. The monthly reports made for fascinating reading. Ethan had been promoted to president. My father had officially named him as his successor. The company was struggling, but still profitable enough to keep the creditors at bay. Then came the report from month 28. Ethan had started gambling, not just casual betting, high-stakes poker games with some very dangerous people in Atlantic City. He'd lost $400,000 in 3 months. Month 30 brought news that he'd taken out a loan against his company stock to cover his gambling debts. Month 32 revealed that he was sleeping with the CFO's wife. Month 34 showed the first signs of embezzlement. Small amounts at first shuffled between accounts, probably hoping our father wouldn't notice. But I noticed. I documented everything. By month 36, Ethan had stolen nearly $3 million from company operating accounts. Bennett Industrial's quarterly reports were starting to show cracks, declining revenue, delayed payments to suppliers, increased debt. My investigator also tracked my father. Robert Bennett was 71 now, showing signs of his age. 2 minor strokes in the past year. But still, stubborn, still proud, still protecting his golden boy's son, even as that son destroyed everything he'd built. Month 40 showed me what I'd been waiting for. Bennett Industrial was in serious financial trouble. The Thornton contract had ended, and Ethan had been unable to renew it or replace it with anything substantial. They were bleeding cash, unable to make payroll without taking on more debt. And now they were in talks with Vermeer Industries, a European conglomerate that specialized in buying American manufacturing companies and gutting them. Vermeer would pay pennies on the dollar, keep the patents and machinery, and lay off 90% of the workforce. They'd ship the jobs overseas and turn the factory into a warehouse. My grandfather had started Bennett Industrial in 1968 in a garage in Ohio. He'd built it with his own hands, working 16-hour days to provide for his family. He treated his workers like family, paid them fairly, gave them health care and pensions that were generous even by union standards. My childhood had been filled with stories of workers whose lives he'd changed, whose children he'd put through college, whose medical bills he'd paid when they got sick. My father had inherited that legacy and maintained it, at least until his obsession with having a male heir to pass it to had blinded him to reality. Ethan was going to sell out everyone my grandfather had ever cared about, and my father was going to let him do it rather than admit his son was a failure, unless I stopped them. I called in every favour I'd accumulated in the financial world. I met with Marcus Thornhill, the most vicious corporate attorney in Manhattan. Marcus was 42, brilliant, and had a reputation for leaving opposing counsel in tears. He also charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny. I laid out my plan. Marcus smiled the smile of a man who enjoyed his work. This is going to be expensive, Ava. We're talking about a multi-pronged strategy. Buying up debt, converting it to equity, legal pressure. You'll need at least 20 million in liquid capital to pull this off. I have 30 million. Then let's burn their war. Burn the world down. Over the next 4 months, we worked in absolute secrecy. Marcus created a network of shell corporations, each one buying small amounts of Bennett Industrial's debt from various creditors. Nothing large enough to raise red flags. Just quiet, consistent acquisition of every vulnerable piece of their financial structure. We also approached the old guard, the shareholders, who'd been loyal to my grandfather. These were men in their 70s and 80s, now retirement age, but still holding significant blocks of stock out of loyalty to the Bennett name. I met with each one personally. I showed them the evidence of Ethan's embezzlement. I showed them the Vermeer offer and what it would mean for the workers they'd known for decades. I reminded them of my grandfather's vision and asked them if this was what he would have wanted. One by one, they agreed to sell me their shares. Some did it for money. Most did it because they were disgusted by what Ethan had become and ashamed that my father was enabling him. By October, I owned or controlled 48.7% of Bennett Industrial. I needed 51% for majority control. That last piece came from the debt conversion. When Ethan had taken out loans against his own stock, he'd put up shares as collateral. When those loans went into default because of his gambling debts, the debt holders had the right to seize those shares. Marcus had bought that debt. On November 20th, 3 days before Thanksgiving, we executed the conversion. Ethan's shares became my shares. I owned 51.3% of my family's company. I was the majority shareholder. I had the power to do anything I wanted, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I called out my mother's cell phone on Thanksgiving morning. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding harried. Ava, is that you? Hello, Mother. Oh my God. Honey, it's been so long. How are you? Where are you? I'm in New York. I heard Ethan is having Thanksgiving dinner at the house with some business associates. The Vermeer people, I assume. There was a long pause. I could hear dishes clattering in the background. How did you know about that? I know everything, Mother. I've always known everything. You just never bothered to ask. Ava, I don't think it would be appropriate for you to come today. Your father is still very upset about what happened, and Ethan has worked so hard to stabilize the company after your accusations nearly destroyed his reputation. My accusations that were completely true, she sighed. That wounded, martyred sigh I'd heard my entire childhood whenever I dared to contradict the family narrative. Why are you calling Ava? To tell you that I'm coming to dinner, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. I hung up before she could respond. I'd flown into Cleveland the night before and checked into a hotel. Marcus had flown in with me along with 2 private security consultants we'd hired. Large men in expensive suits who knew how to handle themselves if things got physical. At 4:30 in the afternoon, I had my hair and makeup done by a professional. I put on a red power suit that had cost me $3,000. Red for power, red for blood. Red because I wanted them to see me coming. The drive to my childhood home took 40 minutes. The house was exactly as I remembered it. A sprawling colonial in the wealthy suburb of Hunting Valley, set back from the road on 3 acres of immaculately landscaped property. Every window glowed with warm light. Picture perfect from the outside, rotten from within. I could see several expensive cars in the circular driveway. The Vermeer executives had arrived. Everything was going according to their plan. They thought they were about to celebrate the acquisition of a desperate American company at a bargain price. They thought this would be a pleasant holiday meal where they'd pretend to care about tradition while preparing to destroy 300 jobs. I stepped out of the town car. Marcus and the security team followed me. Snow was falling light and graceful, the kind of Norman Rockwell scene that belonged on a Christmas card. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. My mother opened it. She'd aged since I'd last seen her. New lines around her eyes and mouth. Her hair was completely silver now, though beautifully styled. She wore a cream-coloured cashmere sweater set and pearls. The perfect, wealthy matron. Her face went pale when she saw me. "Ava, you can't be here. I told you this wasn't appropriate." I pushed past her into the foyer. The smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon filled the air. I could hear voices and laughter from the dining room. "I don't recall asking for permission, Mother." She reached for my arm, but Marcus stepped smoothly between us. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm Marcus Thornhill, Ms. Bennett's legal counsel. I'd advise you not to attempt any physical contact. We're here on legitimate business." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She understood now that this wasn't just a daughter showing up to make a scene. This was something else, something worse. I walked toward the dining room with Marcus and security flanking me. My mother trailed behind, making small, distressed noises. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine spread. The table was set with the good china crystal glasses, gleaming candles flickering. A massive turkey sat at the centre, surrounded by all the traditional sides. Very American. Very wholesome. There were 8 people seated around the table. My father at the head, looking older and frailer than I'd expected. Ethan to his right wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, his face flushed from the wine he'd already consumed. 4 people I didn't recognise clearly the Vermeer contingent, suited and polite. And 1 woman, I did recognise Sarah Chen, the new CFO, who'd replaced the man whose wife Ethan had been sleeping with. They all turned when I entered. The conversation died. Ethan recovered first. He always had been good at improvisation. He stood up, that familiar smug smile spreading across his face. Well, look who decided to crash family dinner. Did you bring your resume? I hear the Applebee's down the street is hiring." Laughter from the Vermeer people. Nervous, uncertain laughter. I walked to the empty chair across from Ethan and set my purse down on the table. Marcus moved to stand behind me, opening his briefcase. "I'm not here for dinner. I'm here to take out the trash." My father's voice weaker than I remembered, but still carrying authority. "Ava, you need to leave. Now, or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. Call them. I'll wait." My mother was crying now, standing in the doorway, wringing her hands. Always the victim, never the participant. Ethan leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, playing to his audience. "You always were dramatic, Ava. What's this about, you want money here?" He pulled it out his wallet and threw a stack of bills onto the table. Hundreds. Probably $2,000 just sitting there like garbage. "Take it and get out of our lives." Something inside me went very calm, very cold. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment I'd spent 3 years preparing for. "Marcus, if you would." Marcus pulled out an iPad and connected it wirelessly to the large television mounted on the dining room wall. My father kept it there to watch football games during family gatherings. Today, it would serve a different purpose. "What is this?" My father was standing now, one hand on the table for support. "This is evidence, Dad. Evidence of what your golden boy has been doing with company money." The first video started playing. Security footage from the Borgata Casino in Atlantic City. Ethan at a poker table, clearly drunk, betting enormous stacks of chips. Losing, betting more. The timestamp showed this was from 6 months ago, so I play poker. "So what?" Marcus swiped to the next file. Bank records showing wire transfers from Bennett Industrial operating accounts to Ethan's personal account, then immediately out to various casinos and loan sharks. $3 million over 18 months. That's doctored. That's fake. Is it? Marcus's voice was perfectly pleasant. "Because I have affidavits from 4 different financial institutions confirming these transactions. I also have testimony from your former assistant who helped you falsify the expense reports. She was very cooperative once we offered her immunity from prosecution." Ethan's face had gone from flushed to pale. He looked at my father, who was staring at the screen like it might bite him. "Dad, this is all lies. She's setting me up. She's always been jealous of me." "Show them the rest, Marcus." The next files were worse. Audio recordings of Ethan talking to his bookie about how he'd just skim a little more from the company accounts to cover his losses. Emails where he discussed using corporate funds to pay for his girlfriend's apartment. Photographs of him with Sarah Chen in compromising positions taken before she'd been promoted to CFO. The promotion she'd received right after the previous CFO had been forced to resign in disgrace. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the money. But you knew about the affair. She didn't answer. She grabbed her coat from the rack in the hallway and left. None of us tried to stop her. The Vermeer executives were whispering to each other in German, their expression shifting from confusion to calculation. They were starting to understand that the deal they'd come here to celebrate might not happen. Marcus pulled up the final document. A stock ownership report certified by 3 independent accounting firms. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Ava Bennett owns 51.3% of Bennett Industrial. She is the majority shareholder and has full legal authority to make all corporate decisions. My father made a sound like he'd been punched. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. That's impossible. The shares are family held. They're locked up in trusts. Not anymore. Your son used his shares as collateral for loans he couldn't repay. Those loans defaulted. I bought the debt and converted it to equity. The remaining shares I purchased from shareholders who were disgusted by what this company has become under Ethan's leadership. You bought my company. No, Dad, I bought my company. The company grandfather built. The company you were about to let Ethan sell to these vultures for parts. I turned to the Vermeer executives. Gentlemen, I'm afraid your deal is off. Bennett Industrial is not for sale. You can finish your turkey if you'd like, but I suggest you start looking for flights back to Brussels. The senior Vermeer man, distinguished, looking with silver hair and icy blue eyes, stood up slowly. Ms. Bennett, perhaps we could discuss this. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that would be beneficial to all parties. There is no arrangement. I've made my decision. Please leave my family's home. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded curtly. He said something in German to his colleagues, and they all gathered their things and left without another word. Professional to the end. Now it was just family. Ethan lunged at me. I saw it coming and stepped back. My security team moved faster than he did. The larger of the 2 men, a former Marine named David, caught Ethan mid-stride and slammed him down onto the dining room table. China shattered. Wine spilled across the white tablecloth like blood. The turkey platter tipped over, sending the bird rolling onto the floor. My mother screamed. My father shouted something, but I couldn't hear it over the chaos. David had Ethan pinned face down, one arm twisted behind his back. Ethan was screaming, cursing, calling me every vile name he could think of. His perfect hair was in his eyes. His expensive suit was covered in cranberry sauce. I walked over to where the contract with Vermeer sat on the sideboard ready to be signed. I picked it up, walked back to the table, and placed it on the floor directly in front of Ethan's face. Then I stepped on it, with my Louboutin heel grinding it into the hardwood. This company belongs to me now. And you, Ethan, you're fired for embezzlement, fraud, and gross incompetence. Security will escort you out. You can't do this. Dad, tell her she can't do this. My father had collapsed into his chair. He looked 10 years older than he had when I'd walked in. His hand was shaking as he reached for his water glass. Robert, please. My mother ran to his side. Do something. She can't just take everything. I turned to face them both. My mother, who'd chosen comfort over courage my entire life. My father, who'd chosen his pride over his principles. Dad, do you remember what you told me when I was 16? You said the Bennett family legacy was about more than money. It was about integrity, about taking care of the people who depended on us, about building something that would last. Ava, you threw all of that away. You chose a son who gambles away millions over a daughter who actually cared about the company. You enabled his addiction and his corruption because admitting he was a failure would have hurt your ego. And now you want me to feel sorry for you. He tried to speak, but his words came out slurred. I realized with shock that he was having a stroke. A real one this time. My mother was crying harder now, calling for someone to call an ambulance. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, gave them the address, explained the situation. When I hung up, I looked down at my father. There was a part of me, some small part, that still remembered being a little girl who thought her daddy could do no wrong, that wanted to comfort him, to hold his hand and tell him it would be okay. But that little girl was dead. You're going to survive this, Dad. And when you do, you're going to have to live with what you've done. You're going to have to watch while I fix the mess you and Ethan made. You're going to have to accept that you chose wrong. He looked at me with something between hatred and despair. David hauled Ethan to his feet. My brother was still struggling, still cursing. Marcus handed him a document. This is a criminal complaint we're filing with the district attorney's office. You have the right to an attorney, though I doubt you can afford a good one anymore. The evidence is overwhelming. You're looking at 7 to 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. Ethan's face crumpled. For just a moment, he looked like the older brother I'd once admired when I was too young to know better. Then, the moment passed and I saw him for what he really was. Weak, entitled, pathetic. Please, Ava, we're family. You should have thought about that before you stole my work and called me a pawn. David and the other security guard walked Ethan out. I could hear him shouting my name all the way to the front door. My mother knelt beside my father's chair, sobbing. She looked up at me, with eyes full of venom. How can you do this to your own family? How can you be so cruel? I crouched down so we were eye level. Where were you, Mum? Where were you when Dad fired me in front of 400 people? Where were you when Ethan was stealing from the company Grandpa built? Where were you when I needed someone to believe in me? You could have stayed. You could have fought for your place. I did fight, and you all chose him over me. So don't you dare call me cruel. You made me this way. Sirens were approaching. The ambulance would be here soon. I stood up, smoothed down my suit, and collected my things. Marcus, we're done here. What about the house? It's still technically company property held in the corporate trust. I looked around at the ruins of what had been meant to be a perfect Thanksgiving dinner. The broken china, the spilled wine, the destroyed turkey. The family that had destroyed itself from within. Sell it. Use the proceeds to fund severance packages for anyone who gets laid off during the restructuring. Give the employees what this family never gave them, actual security. We walked out while my mother wailed behind us. I didn't look back. The next morning, I walked into Bennett Industrial Headquarters for the first time in 3 years. The receptionist didn't recognize me at first. Then her eyes went wide. Ms. Bennett, I didn't know you were coming in today. I'm the new CEO. I'll be coming in every day from now on. Word spread fast. By the time I reached the executive floor, a crowd had gathered. Employees from every department standing in the hallways watching. Some looked afraid. Some looked hopeful. All of them looked uncertain. I stopped in the main lobby where portraits of my grandfather and father hung on the wall. My father's picture showed him at 50, in his prime, looking confident and capable. It was a lie, but my grandfather's portrait was real. He'd insisted on being photographed in his work clothes, with grease on his hands, standing in front of the original machine shop. Take those down! I pointed to the portraits of my father and Ethan. Put up a new one. My grandfather and me when I was 8 years old. The one from his birthday party, where we're both wearing party hats. That's the legacy I want people to see. The facilities manager nodded and immediately got on his radio. I continued to the corner office. My father's office. It still smelled like his cologne. His desk was covered with papers, all of them stamped urgent. Evidence of the crisis Ethan had created. I sat down in the leather chair, swiveled it to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Cleveland stretched out before me, grey and industrial and honest. Marcus appeared in the doorway. The board is assembled for an emergency meeting. They want to discuss the transition plan. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. And, Marcus. Yes. Thank you for everything. He smiled, that predatory smile I'd come to appreciate. This was the most fun I've had in years. Watching you destroy them was art. When I walked into the boardroom, 12 faces turned to look at me. Old men, mostly holdovers from my father's generation. They'd rubber-stamped Ethan's decisions and collected their fees and turned a blind eye to the corruption. Gentlemen, half of you are fired effective immediately. The other half are on probation. I'm bringing in my own people who actually understand modern business practices and ethical oversight. If you want to keep your positions, you'll earn them. One of them, Gerald Morrison, my father's oldest friend, stood up. You can't just come in here and tear everything down. Your father built this company. My grandfather built this company. My father maintained it. Ethan nearly destroyed it, and I'm going to save it. Anyone who doesn't like that can clean out their office today. No one else stood up. Over the next 6 months, I restructured everything. I brought in new management, implemented new financial controls, and launched an internal investigation that revealed even more of Ethan's corruption. The final tally was over $5 million stolen. I settled with the insurance companies, recovered what I could, and used my own money to make the company whole. I renegotiated supplier contracts, updated our manufacturing processes, and personally reached out to every major client we'd lost during Ethan's tenure. I also honoured every commitment my grandfather had made to the workers. Healthcare, pensions, fair wages. I increased the starting pay for factory workers by 15% and created a profit-sharing program. The people who built the products deserved to share in the success. Ethan pleaded guilty to avoid a longer trial. He got 8 years in federal prison. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. My father had a second stroke 3 months after Thanksgiving. It left him partially paralysed and unable to speak clearly. My mother moved him into a nursing home. I set up a trust fund that paid for his care $20,000 a month with one condition. He could never set foot on company property again. My mother called me once, asking me to reconsider, to show mercy, to remember that he was my father. I hung up on her. We haven't spoken since. A year after I took over Bennett, Industrial was profitable again. 3 major new contracts, 2 new product lines, and the highest employee retention rate in a decade. I was working late one Friday when Marcus stopped by with a bottle of wine. He'd become more than my attorney. He was my friend. Maybe more. He set the bottle on my desk. The shareholder report just came out. Stock price is up 42% from when you took over. I poured 2 glasses. We touched the rims together. To revenge, I asked. Marcus shook his head. To justice. There's a difference. You didn't just destroy your family, Ava. You saved 300 jobs. You preserved your grandfather's legacy. I walked to the window. The sun was setting over Cleveland, painting the sky orange and red. Do you ever regret it? He asked. I thought about it. Did I regret watching my brother get handcuffed? Watching my father's health deteriorate? Becoming the kind of person who could do those things without flinching? No, they made their choices. I made mine. The only difference is I was better at it. Are you happy? I turned to face him. I'm free. That's better than happy. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Why did I still wake up some nights replaying that moment when security dragged me out of the plaza? Why did winning feel so much like losing something I couldn't name? When I got home that night, I walked past the framed severance check on my wall. 2 weeks' pay and a legal release. That's what my family thought I was worth. I'd shown them different. The question I couldn't answer was whether the woman I'd become was someone my grandfather would have recognised, someone he would have been proud of. I had to believe so, because the alternative was accepting that in destroying my family, I'd destroyed myself too. But here's the thing about revenge. It burns hot and bright, and it consumes everything it touches, even the person holding the torch. Would I do it all again, knowing what I know now in a heartbeat? Because some things are worth burning for. Dignity, truth, justice. The refusal to be anyone's pawn ever again. I earned my freedom in blood and tears and 3 years of calculated destruction. Maybe that makes me a monster. Maybe it makes me a survivor. Probably both. All I know is that when I look in the mirror now, I see someone I respect. Someone who refused to stay down. Someone who turned humiliation into power. So here's my question for you. If your family betrayed you and tried to destroy you, how far would you go to make them pay? Would you be satisfied with just getting even? Or would you take everything they had and remake it in your own image? Could you become the villain in their story to be the hero in your own? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from people who are supposed to love you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be victims. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to fight back, to demand better, to burn it all down and build something new from the ashes. Because sometimes the only way to win is to become someone who can't lose. And that's exactly what I did.